Hello and welcome to Real Vision, the Defiant's weekly gallivant through the big stories, gouging our gullets with their unbelievability. It's a twin shot of liquid limey as we are blessed by the monthly airdrop that can only be Raoul Pal. Well, I try desperately not to drop the ball with a voice that seems to be dropping further with every passing second. I am Robin Schmidt, the Defiant's head of video, and recently returned from the Arctic where we were burying NFTs in the permafrost. Maybe we will bury them in the dust where they belong today. Raoul, how are you?
It's good. It's just the Batman and Robin show today. It's just the two of us.
But which one are you? Are you Batman then?
I think I'm going to have to be. I'm not a particularly good Batman, but I'll take it for now.
Just play the age card. That'll do it. Batman's old and twisted and has severe emotional problems, so it's fine. I could just be the prancer in tights. And we will be doing some prancing today because I'm going to give you some crap. You bought a Bored Ape. You bought a Bored Ape.
I did. And for a number of different reasons.
Okay, tell me.
And it's not to do with wanting to be part of a group of 33-year-old blokes. It's actually because I think that I have had a long-held hypothesis that the NFT world is morphing into the social token world, and that they're going to create network effects around these kind of projects, whatever they lead to. And I have been following this story. Then I saw Yuga Labs' purchase of the Lava Labs properties of Meebits and CryptoPunks. And I've also been following people like Timbaland, the music producer who had Apes in production and has built an NFT record label. And they presented it to the crypto event we had in Vegas, the takeover. Really interesting. I sat down with those guys and the Madden brothers to talk about what they're doing. Then I obviously saw Adidas getting involved with Bored Ape. Then we've seen the rolling out of the teaser of what Yuga may be doing with this cartoon or game, which is bringing together other crypto communities as well. That was really interesting. Then we've seen that Animoca is about to launch something, which we don't know what it is, but it's clearly a game of some sort. And then the social token drop. So suddenly we've gone from this community of blokes wearing hoodies to a much broader potential participation in a media brand, a 3.0 media brand. And I know you've got opinions about the decentralization of it and other elements of it, but for me, it's like, okay, this is a giant step forwards. And that's why I wanted a stake in that network. So I think of the NFTs as an asset within that network, whether it's digital IP or whatever, but the social tokens is how you reach mass scale. Now, yet to be proven, yet to know the utility, yet to see how this plays out, yet to figure out whether there's going to be staking. Lots of ... don't know, but the ... don't know tends to skew risk reward in the favor of it being something worth participating in. So that's my thesis.
So I bought 2 Bored Apes the day after the drop because
this is why you're better than I am. I'm not good at it.
But I was hanging out with a bunch of kind of NFT superheroes as they were at the time, and there was just this kind of energy around them, and I picked up 2 because I thought, why not? There was really no rhyme or reason, and I think the price was something in a region of 0.1 ETH at the time, which sounds ridiculous when you say it now because we look at this thing and go, 100 ETH? Are you kidding me?
I paid 140 ETH for mine.
So yeah, so this is the thing that people get really angry about because they see these, as they say, fugly cartoon apes that seem to express the very worst instincts of this space. I'm wearing a Bored Ape hoodie today, not because I feel like I belong to the tribe. It's just a really nice quality hoodie, but I am the douchebag, basically. I'm the guy that did the things that everyone says is bad about this. I bought in early, and I bought in just on a whim because I kind of enjoyed them. I actually ended up giving away 5 of them to some friends. Because I wanted them to have exposure to NFTs, and I thought it would be nice for us all to be in this gang together. But at no point did I ever think this is going to be the future of the metaverse. But I think your points are all valid because what Yuga Labs has done is they've managed to take something that was basically just a scrappy community that was deliberately set up when it sort of formed to be a counter movement to CryptoPunk maximalism, effectively. CryptoPunks and those who owned CryptoPunks were the douchebags, and the Bored Apes were not. They quickly became douchebags, and they became obsessed with the floor price and flipping punks. And Meebits was seen as the worst instinct of Lava Labs, just making a ton of money overnight and then doing nothing with it. So Bored Apes were, the community said, we're going to be industrious, we're going to create, we're going to be the people that take this IP on and make something of it. But it is fascinating that it's actually the central entity, Yuga Labs, and I think we can call it that. It's a central entity that has moved most aggressively to create value in what they think is the metaverse. And it does raise these questions about what is the decentralized piece of this, and what is this coin, and who the forces behind it. And when I did my first kind of analysis of it, it just felt like the early days of Facebook. It felt like all these big names just kind of circling around and going, there's something here. And if we all plug in our collective skill sets, we will elevate it to make it the next Facebook. It just feels like that's what's happening
And I
here.
get that. So I'm going to give another perspective. CryptoPunks is Bitcoin and Bored Apes is Ethereum.
Yes.
One you build on top of and has network effects. The other is a pure asset that has bragging rights, essentially. And yes, I understand what you're saying, but we don't go to utopia overnight. It is a huge move towards a decentralized community that has some centralized elements. And I don't have a problem with that because there is no metaverse. There's no one single metaverse. So you either own the Ape token and be part of this one, or you choose not to. But it's not like Yuga Labs are going to control the world. They're just going to be a significant player for the foreseeable future, whatever that is. And it could fail.
So I said exactly that. Bitcoin is punks and Ethereum is apes about a year ago when I made a big film about the launch of the apes, because I was trying to understand what on earth was going on here. And I spoke to Pranksy, who minted 1,000 of them. He owned 1,000 apes and he sold every single one of them like ages ago because he was so sick of it. And like he's gutted. And he's literally, he wants to take a break from this space. I actually think that the Bored Apes are both Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's what's so fascinating here, that the ape originals are like Bitcoin, and that's fine. And they're very scarce. But the entire ecosystem, like mutants and everything else, allow it to be Ethereum as well. I think CryptoPunks are this sort of strange curio that sort of sits there, but it doesn't hold the same preeminence within the NFT space that Bitcoin does within the altcoin space. And so I think the analogy is correct, or at least it was 6 months ago, but I don't think it's correct anymore. And I think what's really fascinating about this is the way that the ApeCoin dropped. And if you went back to the tweet that Yuga Labs put out, I think it was November last year, they were talking about an ApeCoin and how they would do it and the legal ramifications of doing that and how they would set it up. They actually set it up as a DAO, and they set it up in a way to protect themselves, create the illusion of decentralization. And they set it up in the Cayman Islands, of all places. So I went around digging for some kind of legal frameworks of all of this. And I found a blog by Decentral Park Capital where they were talking about two separate, what they call wrapped DAO structures. And the wrapped DAO is an entity or a structure that was originally proposed by A16Z. And it's telling that A16Z have now invested heavily in Yuga Labs. So there's all this kind of stuff going on that appears to now make a lot of sense. But one of the things was you can have a Cayman Foundation concept, or you can have a Panama Private Interest Foundation. I don't know anything about either of those two things. I was hoping you might be able to enlighten me.
I do, because we're looking at launching a real vision token. And, we've launched an NFT and we're going to create NFT communities. So we have to go down this path. So, I saw your great video, just raising questions about all of this stuff you put out a couple of days ago. And so we also deal with Fenwick and West, which are the best lawyers in the entire crypto space that deal with absolutely everybody who dealt with the ape token. So the general understanding is to launch a token, you could run into legal issues because there's no legal clarity. So you need one stage of removal from legal process because it's unclear. So that's what the DAO structure is used for. So the DAO structure, because therefore nobody fully owns it, it's community owned, and over time it probably broadens in its distribution. The reason it's in the Cayman Islands is because the legal jurisdiction makes it easy to do, because there's legal clarity around DAO structures. And everything is done in the Cayman Islands because of something called tax neutrality. So tax neutrality means if you're a UK investor and I'm a American investor and somebody else is a Japanese investor and somebody South Korean, you have a massive tax mess when you launch something. So I've launched a crypto fund of hedge funds, and it's based in the Cayman Islands, not because for tax avoidance or anything of that sort or any weird stuff. It's because if not, everyone gets taxed twice. So what it allows you is to pay tax in your own country without having to pay tax in the Cayman Islands. So that's why they do it. So it's a very basic structure that gives you some legal clarity, because what you don't want is to launch this thing and then everybody to get fined. It keeps it one degree of separation from the corporation that issues it, or the community, or the persons that issue it. So it's pretty normal to do that as a structure, just because of how risky legally it is. And social tokens are still the new frontier. There's really no regulation on this yet, and everyone's terrified of is it a community or not, which is why the airdrop, you give it away for free as opposed to establishing price. Then underneath the DAO structure as well, gives it something else, and then making sure you promise no gains and it's only utility. So everything is done to say, look, this is not a security. So it's a really complicated world, and I understand why they did it.
Yeah, I mean that legal framework from A16Z, it says they raise the possibility of wrapping an entire DAO as a single UNA, which is an unincorporated non-profit association, which would basically allow them to operate in their own country, but protected, as you said. And I think we're going to see more and more of these kind of structures set up. But what's interesting about Bored Apes is that they, without ever intending,
a lot of the DeFi structures are the same. They're all the same.
yes.
So a lot of the Cayman Islands, every week somebody calls me up and says, "Oh, we just moved to the island because we've had to set up our legal jurisdiction here." One of the big DeFi protocols or crypto protocols, because they all have to do it.
Yeah, so it's very clear that the SEC and the Gensler gang are moving to take down this idea of decentralization theater to punish those who are not decentralized. And so I was just looking at Ava version 3 today. You go onto the Ava website and it automatically redirects you to an IPFS archive, which is community run. I've never seen that before. It's bizarre. If you were landing on that, you'd be like, where am I going? What is IPFS? There's just so much explanation that needs to happen. But
yeah, because we even looked at it when we set up Real Vision, is like, where do we host our videos? Because we've got an international audience. And could there be legal rulings where your videos are stored? So if they're streamed from a US AWS server, then are you a US entity? I mean, you don't know, because in this world of governments not having enough tax revenue, they will try every way to pin you down to their jurisdiction.
Absolutely. Well, you said something earlier, which was your thesis on this was that it was a move from social tokens to something broader, something bigger. And it's interesting you brought up Timberland, because I remember when that project dropped and there was this really awkward video of Timberland sitting on his couch trying to explain what an NFT was. And it was clear he didn't have a clue. And he'd sort of been maneuvered into this position where he thought it was cool and he was in it, but the complexities of it, or even the simple version of it, he didn't have. And I'm curious whether you had that impression when you spoke with that team.
No. So look, he's the artist and he doesn't claim to be the NFT expert. What he's saying, and what he said very clearly, is this gives me creativity that I didn't have before. It gives me new avenues for creativity, and that's why I like it. Joel and Benji Madden, who are from Good Charlotte, I think it was, the other partners in it, they're really smart guys and they completely get it, but they also are coming from the artistic angle. Is this gives us a way of owning our rights and artistic rights across multiple media formats, and we can experiment and do new things. So they're actually coming it from artistic purity. And then there's some business people around them who I've met as well, who are just saying, listen, NFTs are the way of doing this, and to create a decentralized or semi-decentralized record label based around NFTs is something worth trying. And I kind of applaud that. And the artist doesn't need to be the expert to be experimenting in the space. I kind of don't frown on it. I don't think they're being extracted. Timberland doesn't need the money. He's actually coming it from, he's a really good guy, and he's really trying to show that, this is a way I want to try stuff because it's different.
And also Timberland, lest we forget, was arguably the most innovative producer of, hip hop, R&B music in the noughties, even into the tens, the stuff he did with Nelly Furtado, Missy Elliott, it's just bananas because he was just experimenting, and you see him work, and it's just coming out of him, and it's just like a little sound. He's a genuine innovator, so it's interesting to see what he will do with this. There is obviously an optics problem with Bored Apes. I don't know if you saw the Paris Hilton, Jimmy Fallon clip where they're talking to each other about something which has nothing in common with their audience. That was a really awkward moment just in general. And it's very easy to pour scorn on this space, and particularly on the Bored Apes, for just being completely elitist and not at all in the
Which is
spirit and
why
values of
I
the creed.
hated it. I didn't want to be involved in it because I thought, this is for a movement that's all about democratization. You've created elitism because unless you have the 300 grand to pay, you can't participate. And I just said, I don't like that. But the social token changed everything for me because what it said was everybody can be involved in this ecosystem now, but only certain people can be asset holders, premium asset holders. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. That's good enough world. Now, could I fractionalize my Bored Ape? Sure. So that's down to me now. So I had exactly the same thing at first. I just didn't like it. I thought it was just a community of blokes. And I remember Sergio Silva was filming outside the Bored Ape meeting in New York, and it was just like a bunch of identical people all queuing up to go to the party. And I thought, that's just not for me. I'm not a club membership guy. But then it kind of changed. It's like, okay, this is a broader concept. Could this be a new media company? And I know, as I said, I know that A16's in, everybody's involved, but I don't mind because it moves the space forward. It's better than not doing it.
It definitely is better than not doing it. I've been on this bizarre journey with them. I never even had to think about it. I mean, I had one, and it was great, and I've enjoyed owning it, and I've enjoyed the fact that I've owned it from a very kind of favorable entry price, because now I don't care about the money and I don't worry about the money. But what I was interested in was when I first made a film about them, it was really easy to reach the guys, Gargamel and No Sass. It was really easy. Now you cannot. You cannot get anywhere near them. I had the same thing with Artifact, the team behind CloneX. Can't get anywhere near them. They are behind a legal wall now, and for obvious reasons, they are keeping their cards very close to their chest. And I think that's sad, because it used to be that you could have these very easy conversations and seek them out, and it would be very straightforward. There is one team I can still do that with, which is the team behind Fluff World, ASM, and this is a Kiwi-based team that are doing a very interesting metaverse concept with Snoop. And I can have conversations with them all the time. They're great. They're very open. And I just hope we don't lose that forever.
But this is what I love about this space, because basically, if you don't want to be part of the community, you just sell your token or your NFT and buy into another one. And I'm seeing that happen. Sergio is one of the guys I speak to a lot about NFTs, and he got out of CryptoPunks. And he was a staunch CryptoPunk and got into Meebits because he wanted to be in a different community with different vibrancy, and he'd kind of lost the faith. And I can't like that, because then the token value represents the value of the community. And if the community is not good, the token value goes down. I mean, that's great.
It's a self-selecting process. Yes. The issue is that it attracts people who are just going to squat on the assets and not really contribute. And I think that's the status symbol part of it. It's a Rolex, it's a Lamborghini, but no, it's a Bored Ape. And now I can make my own coffee cup. It's easy to criticize it. I'm conflicted. I love it. I hate it. I love it. I hate it.
But I think the conflict is right. I don't think there's anything wrong with the conflict, because there is no perfection in this, and that's okay. It's like, it's got its upside and it's got its downside, and I think that honest approach to it is the right answer. The honest approach to all of this stuff. If the Bitcoin maximalists took an honest approach, the world would be a much easier place to say, yeah, you know what, it's moving the world forwards. It's pretty interesting, but it's not perfect. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, this is true. Everything has to be a battle. There has to be a big bad everywhere.
I know. It's crazy.
In my kind of mental picture of these things, that we talked about Bored Apes being Ethereum and punks being Bitcoin. Of course, that's slightly misleading, because NFTs they exist in this strange space where they're able to evolve and move with the times and create their own history on their own terms, bizarrely. You can have an NFT that can spawn another NFT. It can spawn a baby version of itself that can be cheaper and can allow more people to gain access to the collection. And I think a lot of projects looked at Bored Apes and they forked it. They forked the ideas. They did, Bored Apes did a kennel club because they were worried that their community was losing interest. So they airdropped these dogs, and those continue to have value, even though they're quite ugly, to be honest. But the shitcoins can't do that. You can't just suddenly spin up like a duplicate collection of like double the supply of a brand new
No,
shitcoin
but
just out of nowhere.
it's how I think of it is the composability factor, right? Because of the open IP of Bored Apes, people can do stuff with it. So what you're doing is you've got a base layer like Ethereum, and then an applications layer. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it. So the application layer is the apes in production. There's what Adidas did. It's what Animoca are doing, right? And that's just the start. I mean, who knows? There could be a whole DeFi application based around this kind of thing once it comes to staking. Again, we don't know, but what it tells you, it's got a higher probability of network effects because there's more use for it. While CryptoPunks has no other use because that composability is not built in. And maybe Yuga try and introduce it, but I'm not sure it's possible because it's in the smart contract.
Well, and they've sort of allowed it to be a possibility in this other side that they've teased.
Yes.
Whether it's a game. I mean, what you can see clearly from the signs that are out there, that what they're proposing, what they put together, the conversations they've had are enormous. And the whole point of what they were trying to do was to open up this ecosystem to a vastly larger audience. So if you think about 10,000 Bored Apes, there's a few people that've got like 100 of them. So that's that. You can't own one. Basically, it's impossible to own one. So what else can you do that opens this up so it's not elitist and everything else? And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see when they step into worlds that are more familiar to people, where their expectations are higher because they're used to seeing, competing products or familiar products like a game that they know that works really well. When they step into that world, can they still compete?
Who the hell knows? Do apes themselves, because right now the demographic is a problem. So does that appeal to a hugely broad audience? I'm not sure. And right now the jury's out on that. Yuga, I get why they've just raised 450 million, because they could do this trick again. There's fantastic projects like World of Women out there as well. That was already featured in their other side thing. So they can change demographics, they can broaden it out, they can create different characters, different ecosystems. So for Yuga, I get it. Bored Ape, I don't know. But I wanted to participate because I have a belief in this structure of NFTs surrounded by social tokens to create much larger movements.
And so the ape that you bought is a bloodshot-eyed. He's wearing a laurel wreath.
I kind of thought he looked kind of wise, maybe slightly tired.
He looks drunk.
But it was I think I liked it because it was pretty pure, and I liked the kind of least flashy element by just having a laurel wreath. I just kind of like the simplicity.
Did you look at rarity? Because the laurel wreath's pretty rare, I think.
Yeah, it is pretty rare. I did look at it, but it was just appealed to me. I just thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to use it as my PFP either, because again, I'm not trying to make the statement about that. I'm actually making the statement about, okay, this is an interesting concept overall. So
it's fascinating. The whole NFT space it blows my mind, and it feels like I think people have thought this was where it would peak, and there would be this insanity phase, and it would just die. And actually, when you look at this now, you go, this is not dead. This has inserted itself into pop culture. There is a seed here, and whether you like it or not, and a lot of people do not, it's going to explode. And so I've been talking about NFTs for a long time now. And this is from like 2018, been talking about NFTs, and to see where we are now, it feels like just the word NFT needs to go away and it not be a thing anymore. And we can just talk about a brand new phase in culture and ownership and these kind of things. But we're still kind of stuck there at the moment. Talking about culture and being stuck in pop culture, Vitalik was on the cover of Time magazine. Did you read the article?
Yes, I did.
He's not a fan of apes.
He's not a fan of apes, but I get it. He's a serious guy and he's wants serious stuff.
He
Um,
doesn't look like a serious guy though. When you look at him, you're like, who is this clown in his
I know,
unicorn
I know.
t-shirt?
I really like that whole kind of thing because he is. I mean, he's like ludicrously young. He's he's like an alien, and he gave us this alien project, which is Ethereum, and he's difficult to pin down. But he's kind of, I think he's evolving into a bit like Sam Bankman-Fried, some sort of pretty principled person, and I think that's interesting. It's good. The stewardship that he has. He's not the richest man in the Ethereum space, which is kind of bizarre, but that's him. What he did with the Shiba Inu, he could have been a capitalist, and he just kind of gave it away and said, "Look, it's not my project. It's not for me." I don't know. I think he's a really interesting character, and I mean, and he's actually not a bad communicator, even though he looks like he's so autistic he couldn't communicate. But he's actually pretty good.
It's so funny how tech and the struggles of tech echo, because I don't know. I've got a recommendation for you. There's a
Go
TV
for it.
show called Valley of the Boom that was on National Geographic 4 years ago, and it talked about the explosion of the IPO phase, the Netscape Internet Explorer wars, and you see a young Mark Andreessen struggling with his own fame. He famously went on the cover of Time magazine wearing no shoes. He's in a throne, and it feels like this Vitalik thing. They call him the Prince of Crypto. It's a really strong echo of that moment because Andreessen was incredibly awkward, and he was taking on Microsoft, and he was this hero of this new free open internet. He's of course A16Z now, and he's like very much establishment, big time investor, and it just fascinating to see how that IPO phase directly echoed by the ICO phase. They were literally the same mechanics at phase.
They
It just
were.
happened a lot faster. It was exactly the same things going on, and now we're at this emerging new thing. And I know you're a big kind of proponent of the fourth turning and these kind of things and feeling where we are now. But I think one of the attributes of the fourth turning is that it like culture goes first, and it's always artists that move into a new area and then create that gentrification, then it moves up, and that's sort of what's happening here. Do you feel like that's right?
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely the fourth term. We're creating an entire parallel system of finance, money, value, everything, right? So it's a total rejection of everything that went before it,
Or
which is,
or is it simply a repetition of what went before it?
well, everything rhymes, right? Because it's very rare that something completely alien comes out of nowhere. So, of
Apart from
course,
Vitalik.
apart from Vitalik, maybe. So, yeah, maybe David Bowie, but maybe there's only a few of those people. Um, yes, of course it rhymes because we only know how to do things in certain ways right now. But when we look back in 30 years, will it be even recognizable to what we're thinking now? Because we put this ability to morph a financial system in place because of the decentralized element. I mean, as you know, it's impossible to keep up because so many people are doing so much stuff. That's unlike the financial system because that was centralized. So there, it's going to be JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or whoever who are pioneering the space because they've got a bunch of smart talent aggregated in one place and they get to do it. But here it can come from anywhere. And it's like this bushfire. It's kind of going on everywhere around you. You can't put it out and you don't know where it's going to fully burn from. So yeah, I think it's very fourth turning to me.
There was something you said earlier, which is, if you want to exit a community, you can sell your token. I mean, it's not always possible to sell it, but you have that right to exercise the option to sell your token. And there's a strong idea of agency here. I'm looking at this deal with the Bored Apes and everything else, and I'm seeing like the return to some sort of formal corporate structures, but we do have a choice. And I think there's one thing about this space that still endures is the fact that you can decide to go elsewhere. You can decide not to use a centralized exchange. Those options are there. I don't know what regulation is going to do to that, but this important point of agency and having the power to determine your own destiny, it's still there. And I think for me, that's what Web3 should cling to no matter what regulation forces them to give up.
I
It's
think it is because everybody is fighting for it, but I always believe there's usually a grand compromise somewhere. And what's happening in Bored Apes is one of those kind of compromises. Whether you want to accept it or not, I think we're still free to choose. As you say, let's hope that we get given that choice ongoing. It's interesting to see, Barry Silbert is now talking a lot about Zcash and stuff like this, which is essentially that freedom of choice. A lot of these kind of privacy tokens, I find them difficult to invest in because you just don't know what the regulator is going to do. But I get it, right? That's just what people are saying there is we want the freedom of choice. I don't know. What do you think about those?
Oh gosh, the privacy debate is so tough. I think we struggle with this at Harmony as well. That there has to be auditable privacy. So you have privacy to a degree. So for instance, you could reveal that you have a position in something, but not necessarily the composition of that position, because that would be giving something up. So this idea of like, where does the line sit, and under what circumstances is it okay to divulge? There's I see people saying, can you blacklist this address, please? You're like, well, why are you asking that? The whole point is you don't. I'm getting airdropped so much garbage right now that I mean, you don't interact with it, but like, I can't stop that happening. And if I say, please stop this happening, then we're against the spirit of the thing in the first place. So it's a really tough thing to straddle. And I guess someone somewhere is going to figure out that there's going to be a checkbox, and would you like to receive garbage tokens? Would you like to receive NFTs?
You'll be able to get a reject button, much like you can reject your email. Stuff like that. I think it's interesting. The other thing I want to hear from you is about your trip.
Oh yes. Well, so I went to the Arctic and to a lovely place called Longyearbyen, which is way up north. It's way north of Greenland, up in the Arctic Circle. So this is a fascinating place, and it's an archipelago of islands where 150 years ago settlers landed and they found coal. You had Russian settlements and Norwegian settlements, but it was protected by the Svalbard Treaty, which means that it's a demilitarized zone. You cannot wage war there. You cannot take it over. You cannot invade. And it is a place where if you decide to go there, they can't kick you out and you can settle. And so there's no visa requirements. So it's a place which is very much like a crypto community, except in real life. They had their own money called Svalbard money, which you earn by mining. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like, so you mined, and they had their internal currencies, and it was basically a way for the massive mining company to keep real money for themselves. And then there was a sort of internal community, and of course they were cut off from the real world for 6 months at a time, so they had to sort of subsist on whatever they had. So they had to create their own money. Really fascinating place, and we were there because this is the place where the world seed vault is housed, and this is the place that holds all the important seeds in the world. Syria's own seed vault was destroyed a few years back, and they had to go to this bank and withdraw seed samples so they could repopulate their own seed vault. So this is the most important crops, in the world: rice and wheat and barley and these kind of things. Right next door to it is the Arctic World Archive, which is a repository for important digital artifacts. And there's documents from the Vatican. There's documents of Edvard Munch's entire work is stored there. And there's also a huge repository from GitHub. So some of the most important open source software is stored there. And the way they store it is, its hard drives are notoriously non-robust over a long period of time because the technology moves so fast. So they scan QR codes and just identifying material onto film, because film has been around for 150 years, like celluloid film, the film you put through a projector and screen movies with. It's very, very robust, and the only technology you need to view it is a light source. So it's one of these incredibly robust digital archiving solutions that is from the past. And because Svalbard's ecosystem it's in the permafrost, it's a very secure, safe, stable environment around -2 degrees. They think that this film could last for around 1,000 years, maybe even 2,000 years, without being disturbed. And all you would really need to know is, can I shine a light through it? And if I can decipher what's there, what information do I need in order to understand what I'm here? So NFTs have this criticism that's thrown at them that you don't own the art, you only own a reference to the art. On-chain art doesn't suffer from that problem. So, art blocks or cyber brokers, for instance, it's actually encoded into the blockchain itself. But a lot of art is, referenced on AWS servers. So it could just disappear. IPFS itself, which sounds fantastic, but actually you only have a reference to the fact that the data might be there. And if it's only housed on one node, which is entirely possible, and that node decides, well, actually, I don't like your data, I'm going to store something else, it could go away as well. The only really truly robust kind of decentralized storage is Arweave. But this community of artists decided they were going to go and house their art securely in a vault, not necessarily because they believed it was the best art and it deserved to be there, but to prove that there was something that mattered to them. And if it mattered to them, it would matter to other people, and it should. And who are we to judge whether it's culturally significant or not? You know, so many artists were not celebrated or valued in their lifetime, and this could entirely be the case here. So they've opened up this digital archive. It's called the Non-Fungible Vault in Svalbard, and you go in this disused coal mine, and you walk down, and you walk down, and you're just like, this is nuts. And then there's this kind of small cave with a storage container, and then you get a roll of film in a sealed foil bag, and you put it in the vault, and it's secure, backed up, safe,
And can
completely
anybody
air-gapped.
can anybody do that?
Yes, you can. Anybody, and that's the point. You know, it's not exclusive at all. It should be for anyone to put
And
their
you give
material
away
in
your
their...
rights to it, essentially, meaning that's now for the vault, and they can, and whoever discovers it in 1,000 years' time or whatever.
It's to preserve the sanctity of the art. I mean, it comes to open source. I mean, yeah, it's preserving culture for posterity. I mean, there's a slightly bittersweet note to all this, which is that part of the world is in the permafrost, but the permafrost is rising the whole time, and that part of the world is warming up at a great rate of knots. But I mean, what a crazy trip. It just felt so odd to be talking about NFTs, having kind of done several films recently where I was kind of looking at the huge criticisms of this space, and to be standing in a vault with real humans and a physical copy of this thing that's, you know, my favorite thing of all, which is celluloid film. I don't, you've probably never shot on film, but shooting on film is this magical transporting experience that is so organic and beautiful, and the mistakes that come through and the grain, it's like, ah, my God, it's the best thing. So for that to be the way that NFTs are stored, it was kind of this strange full
Well,
circle.
what a great life experience, and just a great journey.
Oh, you should definitely go there. You should definitely go there. It's like you you go out to the fjord at the bottom of Longyearbyen, and then there's just mountains, and you realize that if you go up there, well, that's the Arctic Circle. There is nothing else there. You're in the most northern town in the world. It's pretty cool.
Love
So
it.
yeah,
Love
that
it.
was a really exciting trip to go on, and it's nice to be able to get out of the studio and film some real stuff, because you know, so much of that we talk about is conceptual. It's numbers. It's concepts and ideas that you can't visualize or create a real impression of, and just there's something very visceral about the cold and the realness and a man with a gun to shoot polar bears, and then NFTs. It's just bizarre but beautiful at the same time.
I love it. Now, I don't know, we're going to get told off for running out of time soon, but I want to talk about one more thing with you, just to get your
Yes.
thoughts, because you've been away and you and I haven't chatted. Really interesting what Luna's doing with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, I mean, Do Kwon is not a stupid guy at all. Um, I don't know if you are aware of Anchor Protocol and how important that is within the Lunar ecosystem. But for those who don't know, the Lunar is a layer one that is completely built and architected around DeFi. So it's money lending markets, and a whole bunch of other stuff is being built on it, and it's built around this algorithmic stablecoin UST, and you can deposit UST into Anchor and get a 20% rate of interest fixed. It's sort of slowly dropping, but generally they wanted to establish it as the benchmark interest rate for fixed rate income on crypto. And if you think about 20% just on your savings in your bank account, in your normal in real life bank account, you would be, I mean, you would be elbowing people out of the way for that rate if it was offered to you by a high street bank. And Luna has basically said, we're not changing that. But so they've had to change everything else. And so they're taking on Bitcoin as part of their treasury, which
As their
is,
collateral, which is something I talked about several years ago, and I said, it's a great collateral.
it is a great collateral. And you know, it's got that Lindy effect. So the longer it goes on, the more robust it becomes, and the more adopted it becomes. And we've got Michael Saylor, and you know, it's like it's not a dumb move. So they've kind of broadened out the scope of what Terra can be, and that's the wonderful thing. You know, they get criticized, they make changes, and they've bought a lot of it as well.
Yeah,
and
well,
they're just going to keep buying it and keep buying it every
I
month.
don't
And
think
so,
they've fully started yet, which is kind of weird because Doe has been talking about it, and I
I'm
think
making
they
bets as well. I'm making
are
bets,
making
very,
bets
very
because
public
I
bets.
think
Yeah.
they've got 3 billion in treasury to buy of Bitcoin now. And he thinks, listen, if this works and it attracts people into the space, they'll be at 10 billion before you know it. And all he wants to be is a larger Bitcoin holder than Michael Saylor to show that the space has evolved. Because now it's being used as collateral, and so now you're financializing Bitcoin in a way that didn't exist before. I think it's really interesting.
And it's a diversification of the treasury as well, because
Yeah.
the whole ecosystem is very dependent on the performance of Luna, and Luna is extremely volatile. It's been doing incredibly well, but when something does incredibly well, it also can go incredibly badly when market sentiment turns against them. But yeah, it's fascinating, and I wholeheartedly respect and admire the Terra ecosystem, and I have done since I first discovered it, because there's just all these really beautifully engineered pieces, but it's all about DeFi. It's all about this simple idea of, can your money do a little bit more for you? Um, and that's really all I want out of DeFi. It's just like my choice on the high street or my choice in DeFi. It should be better in every single way, but there's so many risks attached to it. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. But yeah, big move, send a big signal as well.
Yeah,
So
really interesting.
really curious. So I guess our time is at an end. It was, well, we were dropping bombs left, right, and center. But the biggest bomb, I think, is that you have bought an ape. And now we are brothers in the apehood of, are we douchebags or not? I think we probably are, but that's okay.
Probably. It's okay.
Probably.
Nobody's perfect.
Raoul, thanks so much for joining us. This was Real Version versus the Defiant, and we will see you next week for more of the same.